open questions from the floor with a roving microphone so that you can react to some of the things that you've heard, question them further, or if you felt that you didn't want to have a written question, then that's fine. One thing I would just like to ask before we begin is, if you are a first-time voter in this election, would you please just put your hand up, because I know there are many of you among us. So if this is your first election you've ever had the chance to vote in, would you please pop your hand? Got a few. Maybe some people would sort of think I'm being elected. Thank you. Thank you. So, let me now hand over to Councillor Cheryl Want, who's going to begin us with this.
Our God and God of our ancestors, the one who inspires salvation, source of life and power, may you bless and protect the leaders of our nation and all those who exercise authority in keeping with our laws. May the Holy One of Blessing bring strength to all who work in our communities on behalf of those who need our support, strengthening them both in body and in spirit, and rewarding their efforts with success. May those in leadership act in accordance with the rabbinic insight that the truly strong are those who raise up the fallen, the truly honored are those who honor caregivers, and the truly wise are those who acknowledge the vital work of all our teachers. We turn to our leaders for inspiration and hope, direction, and guidance. May they lead us in paths of peace, build communal cohesion through both word and deed, and bring about the blessing we pray for at the conclusion of each of our prayer services. May the one who brings peace to the heavens bring peace and growing safety and prosperity to our world here below. And to that we all say,
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Mark. Before I introduce the candidates, now on behalf of all of the guests and visitors here this evening, thank you, Rabbi, very much, and your community for once again offering us the hospitality we've come to expect when we come here. It's great. Thank you very, very much. To say all of the cakes are all fat-free and low calorie. So, what I'd like to do now is introduce the candidates to you, and I've done them in the list in which they were on the internet. So there's no particular, has to go in some kind of order. So introduce Mike Freer, who is our current MP, was elected in May 2010. And as well as fighting hard for Finchley Memorial Hospital, he managed to get 8.3 million from Mayor Johnson for a traffic scheme just down the road. So that's an amazing thing. He also served on various committees, work and pensions, communities and local government, which makes some sense. Scottish Affairs Committee, perhaps you'd like to tell us at some point how you managed to get on with that. Sarah Sackman, welcome to you. You grew up, I believe, in East Finchley, you're a local girl. You work as a public interest and community barrister, and in that role you fought or gave advice to those fighting the shutdown and demolish of the Free and Barnet Library, which was successful and is now a model for other community-run libraries around the country. And so it's very good to welcome you here this evening. Jonathan Davis is the Liberal candidate, Conservative, getting much sure, Labour and Liberal Democrats. That is important, I suppose. Jonathan, who's our Liberal Democrat candidate, was a councillor for Charles Hill for a number of years and has just recently retired from working as a solicitor in the city, and he was the chairman of the Liberal Democrats in England from the 1st of January 2010 to 1st of January 2012. You're very welcome. Good to have you with us this evening. Richard King, for UKIP, you are an IT manager, I'm told. It seemed, from what I read about you, that with your father's army background as well as your work in your profession, you pretty much managed projects and visited most of the parts of the world. And so you bring that kind of breadth of experience with you. Also, I noticed that you're a third dan black belt jiu-jitsu. I'm so sorry if I got that wrong. I can't apologise enough for that. I just thought you would need to know that. Adele, candidate from the Green Party, very good to have you with us here this evening. You made your debut in politics, I think, at the last Barnet Council elections, and you're now obviously standing as our candidate for our parliamentary seat. It's very good to welcome you here this evening as well. Mark, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you. So we're going to begin, and what I'm going to suggest is that we start, if that's okay with Richard, to begin us with 2 minutes of whatever you wish to say to introduce yourself to your potential voters.
Thank you, it's great to be here. I'm sure you will have heard lots of stories of lies about UKIP spread by our opponents and from various other sources. I hope I can answer your questions clearly tonight and put the record straight. We live in a democracy, and our democracy is very fragile. Viviane Reding, who's one of the EU commissioners, says on record that 75 to 80% of our laws are now made by the EU in Brussels, not by our own British MPs. So whether you vote for Labour or for the Tories, 90%, what you actually get is 75% from Brussels. UKIP believe that all of our laws should be made by our sovereign British Parliament, which is the only body that is really accountable to the voters, to you. The EU wants to become a European superpower, and it is already meddling in the affairs of other countries such as the Ukraine and Israel and other places. EU freedom of movement allows uncontrolled immigration, and millions of people come from countries that are much less tolerant than our own. We understand the effects in this community of what that causes. With Charlie Hebdo and the other dreadful attacks, UKIP believe in controlled immigration. We understand that we have to have immigration, and we are a diverse country, and we have always been very tolerant. This is one of the best countries and most tolerant countries in the world, and we need to keep it that way. Uncontrolled immigration doesn't help us with that. Last year, UKIP came first in the European elections, with 27.5% of the vote. In Finchley and Golders Green, UKIP can win this seat with 27.5% of the vote. That's just 1 in 4, slightly more than 1 in 4 voted. UKIP announced a new manifesto yesterday, and my heart actually raised its beat when I read this. I really encourage you to look at it. That might sound a little sad, but it was actually true. You can find this on our website, which is ukipbarnet.org, and please take a look at it. It is pure British common sense. Thank you very much.
Will that work, Alex? You can try.
Can you pick up the sound if I stand up? It's an occupational hazard of being a barrister that I'm used to standing up. Well, can I say that it's absolutely wonderful to be here tonight. The Vicar mentioned the library campaign, and that campaign inspired me to stand in this election because it brought together people from a cross-section of our community. Those campaigning to save the library range from single mothers to the local rabbi, Occupy activists to a retired accountant. And what that campaign demonstrated to me is that the people fighting for that library weren't doing so as individuals, but were doing so because the library belonged to them as a community. And that value of social justice, I believe, runs through the core of Aelif Garden Synagogue and also through Golders Green Parish Church. I'm well aware of the work that you do together through your homeless shelter, through the monthly drop-in for refugees, and through the interfaith work between your community. That value of social justice, that's the same value that I know that people in this community want to see in their politics. And it's the same value that's run through all the campaigns that I've been involved in the last couple of years to advocate for more affordable housing, to protect our GP surgeries and respite care for disabled people. Because those values of social justice, of community and tolerance, those are the values that people are crying out to see, not just in this community in Finchley and Golders Green, but in our politics too. And they're the values that finally my grandfather taught me when he taught me the words of Pirkei Avot, the Jewish ethics of the fathers. He taught me, if I'm only for myself, then what am I? But if I'm not for myself, then who will be for me? And it is those two values of self-reliance and hard work on the one hand, but a belief in the community and the collective on the other, which is why I'm standing in this election.
Thank you, Roman. I was reminded when we started the evening with a prayer that daily the House of Commons begins its business with a prayer. And it is joked the chaplain looks at the assembled MPs and then prays for country. Hopefully we're better than that. As the Vicar said, 5 years ago I was part of the Liberal Democrats National Executive Committee, which in the immediate aftermath of the general election result had to decide what to do. It was looking at that, it was facing that decision at a time of economic crisis, in the words of the infamous letter from the Labour then Treasury Minister, "I'm terribly sorry there's no more money." And it was against that background that I voted, as did my colleagues. You may have seen a version of it on the TV play recently, to form the coalition government. We did so to turn around the country's economy, and I'm proud of the record of the coalition government in that respect, in leading the fastest growing economy in Europe, falling unemployment, 2 million apprenticeships created, zero inflation. At the same time, we have delivered tax cuts not to millionaires, but to ordinary working people who had a tax cut of £900 or thereabouts as a result of what the Liberal Democrats have done in government. In the last TV debates, David Cameron said it was impossible to deliver that tax cut. The Liberal Democrats said, no, if we are in government, it must happen, and it did. And the more votes the Liberal Democrats win in this election, the stronger will be our position after the general election to deliver more of the same, a stronger economy, a fairer society, opportunity for all. Opportunity above all through our schools. The Liberal Democrats' pupil freedom has delivered £16 million to schools just in the borough of Barnet. There's much that we can do, and I hope you'll join us on that journey.
I'll try to be brief because we want to get through as many questions as possible. So I'll say a little bit about me. I first moved to Golders Green in 1979, so I've always lived here or very near here, apart from 4 years in Italy. So I've been here as a young student. I started my career here. I hope to grow old here with any luck. And everything that I wanted in life as a child and a young woman, London has given me in this area, has given me. So I love this area. I love London. I've brought up both of my sons here since they were babies. So I've also seen what it's like with nurseries, with schools. They're now starting university, so I know what that's like as well. As a career, I'm a writer. I started Bugle publishing 5 years ago. It's one of Golders Green's local small businesses. Before that, I was a financial journalist, so I come across what's in our manifesto. I'm also a lifelong learner and academic. While my sons were small, I did 2 MAs. I'm now doing a PhD with Andrew Motion at the University of London Royal Holloway, and I'll be teaching there. Unless I'm very lucky to make me an MP, in which case I'll drop that idea. Thank you so much for inviting me to this synagogue. I've heard so much about the important work that you do here, and I really empathise with it, the humanitarian work that you do, both internationally and locally. And one of our Green Party members, Dan Zaroff, who is a lecturer at Middlesex University, was very pleased to hear I was coming here today and pointed out this work. It's very similar to the kind of things I do as a volunteer, along with, as if I'm not busy enough. I've been campaigning for the homeless since the early 1990s, when I worked with Mother Teresa's group in Kilburn, and I help 2 cold weather shelters now in cross-faith in the way you do. There's 26% child poverty in Golders Green, 1 million using food banks, so I do empathise with all that you're doing. I'm here for environmental justice, which you'd expect, but I'm also here for social justice, and I feel those are 2 things very important to all of you as well as me. I will be in touch.
I'm Mike Frey and I want to continue to be your Member of Parliament. Every morning I get up and Finchley Goes Green. Every evening I come home to Finchley Goes Green. It's where I chose to live and I've been privileged to be your MP for the last 5 years. Why am I a Conservative? Well, I was raised in a 2 down in Manchester. It was almost stereotypically Coronation Street. I remember my parents doing all the overtime they could find to pay for my school uniform. And that's why people being in work means so much to me. My parents sacrificed their holidays to make sure I didn't go without, and that instilled in me the need to get a good education so I could get on in life. Seeing my parents scrimp and save is why I know how important it is to have taken 3 million of the lowest paid out of tax altogether, and that's why I understand why cutting tax to 27 million ordinary taxpayers means so much. My parents and my upbringing made me realise that working hard, saving up, doing the right thing should be made easier. It should be rewarded, not made harder or penalised. I want a government that can deliver a strong economy to fund our public services, like the NHS or our pensions. An economy that delivers jobs and pay packets. A government that rewards hard work and where aspiration is a virtue and not a dirty word. That's what makes me a Conservative, and that's what makes me want to continue as your hard-working, local and accountable Member of Parliament.
Thank you very much for our candidates both for being here and also for your presentations just now. So let's begin with the first question, a written question sent in, which is this one. How are the parties, and the way I intend to do this, I think we're literally going to begin with Mike, and then next question we'll start with Adele, and we'll just go that way, so hopefully it's all nice and fair as we go. And each of you will get a minute, which Rex will time with his ruthless efficiency. So, Mike, you'll be first on this one, please. How are the parties going to deal with the chronic shortage of affordable accommodation in this area? What commitments are there to building more social housing?
There's no magic wand. There's a number of parts. One is to try and reduce the magnet of London, which is why the government is investing so much in making the northern powerhouses, so you have thriving economies outside of London. Locally, it's about providing money so we can build on brownfield land, but actually encouraging councils to build. Actually, Barnet is the 10th best council out of 33 in London for building houses, including social rent, and also about part ownership and part rent. It's about making it easier for people to buy, but as well as increasing the housing stock. And one of the challenges of Member of Parliament is you have to deal with people who say, we don't want more building in our streets, but we want more homes for our grandkids. And you have to try and square that circle. So it's about incentivising councils, streamlining planning, and making sure that the councils have a proper policy to deliver affordable housing on every development.
So you can fit an extra question in like that. Very appropriate you asked this question today. I tore this out of the Evening Standard. Housing is one of my big issues. Here in London alone, there were 348,000 people on the waiting list for a council home last year. So all this that we're hearing about the council housing not being a problem, there is a problem. I can see why. It's one of the big campaigns. Wasn't read out at the beginning, but I'm really campaigning on what's happening to council estates in this area. Every council estate I've gone to on this area, I've been shocked to find they're being demolished, they're being handed to private property developers in the name of regeneration. Regeneration means regenerating a council estate so that those people get a better home. Instead, these people are being moved from council estates here, they're being moved to Graham Park temporarily, which is earmarked for demolition. They're ending up in Birmingham and so on. We will and that has to stop. We will build 500,000 new social homes. I can show the costing for that. I'm being cut short. So apart from that, we will stop overseas investment as a cash cow in properties that are often left empty, that's causing a price bubble, and stop the tax relief on buy-to-let, the mortgage relief that's also causing this kind of investment, causing property to cost too much, rent caps, and licensing of landlords, and I'll have to so I've got too many policies on it.
Ultimately, the only solution to the housing crisis is to build more houses. And we have a target of building 300,000 more houses. To do that, largely in garden cities where the additional development is wanted, and not in urban areas where it is unwanted and will amount to cause excessive congestion. Then when there is development, we have to ensure that includes an appropriate proportion of affordable housing, something on which the Mayor of London's record is, shall we say, not as good as it could be. I have also to say, to Mike, he didn't mention it, but one disaster for affordable housing is to force the sale of large amounts of affordable housing and finally, we have a scheme detailed in the manifesto for rent to buy, whereby people can enter into a scheme whereby the rent that they will pay will also contribute to them acquiring ownership of their property.
It used to be the case that if you worked hard in this country, you could expect to save even whilst you were renting and hope to put down a deposit for a mortgage. That's no longer possible for families in London, and younger people are looking well into their 40s before they can hope to afford a home in this city. We have a housing crisis, and as you've heard, the solution to that rise in demand is to increase supply. Labour is committed to building 200,000 homes a year in the coming Parliament. And one of the ways in which we'll do that is by giving councils the power to levy a tax on those developers who don't make use on their land. If you like, use it or lose it. But the Conservatives who speak so highly of producing more homes, the fact is that by not committing to any more capital investment, they simply can't deliver those new homes. We also offer a better deal for renters by capping rents, and I entirely agree with Jonathan here to my right, that this new proposal, this back of an envelope right to buy policy, simply won't work and will make housing less affordable, not more affordable.
There is a shortage of accommodation because in 2008 there was a recession and the house building was stopped. The house market stalled, it didn't go into recession, it stalled, and the house building was actually stopped deliberately in order to keep the house prices up, to keep the feel-good factor going for the current government. UKIP, we need more houses now. UKIP will protect the green belt, however. We have to stop concreting over our environment and every single little green space there is in our borough. UKIP are committed in our new manifesto to build 1 million homes by 2020. That's 200,000 a year, but they will all be almost totally beyond brownfield sites. There are masses of brownfield sites all over our cities where we can build houses. We don't need to keep going over our green belt. It's not just one issue. Housing is about two issues. It's about supply of housing and demand. We have to have a controlled immigration policy so that we know how many people we have coming into our country, and then we can build the right number of houses for everybody.
Thank you. So our next question. Some of our questions are named, people put their names to it. I hope that they're therefore okay with me mentioning their name. I'm assuming having done so, it's okay. And some are not. And so this is a question from Dana Carlin. Here at ALIF, like many other faith groups, and again we'll begin with you with this one. Here at ALIF, like many other faith groups, we collect food for a local food bank. Why do you think there's been such a rise in the number of people who need food aid, and what would you do to address this problem?
Well, you've heard that one of the things I do to address it for many years is I've actually been volunteering with the homeless. It certainly has got a lot worse. I've been collecting for food banks during my campaign because it feels not that useful to be doing just a stall. The reasons for it are, and they will increase with the squeezing of welfare and benefits. If there's another government, we can't squeeze those people anymore. 22% and 29% of the people who use food banks, some of them have their benefits sanctioned. They really can't live with their benefits sanctioned. That has to stop. 29% are in work and their salaries are too low to feed their families. So those are the two main reasons we need a minimum wage that's a proper living wage. We have to stop saying that we're increasing employment and really we're creating jobs that people can't live on, and the taxpayers paying people in work benefits. We're paying for those people to be underpaid, and we're having to create food banks. We're having to support charity like an American system. If the government gets in again, it will get even worse with their squeezes with tax cuts for the very wealthy.
What we absolutely mustn't do is throw the entire burden of the economic crisis on those recipients of welfare benefits. And that is what is the Conservative solution going forward to balancing the budget solely through public spending cuts. We clearly have had an economic crisis, and everyone has had to bear a burden of that. And we've had to party in government some decisions that we have agreed through gritty teeth. But we're quite clear going forward that welfare benefits must be protected and not frozen, and that the burden must be borne fairly across society.
The proliferation of food banks, even here in our own community in Finchley and Golders Green, is a disgrace. And what we need to do is address not just the symptoms of that. I know many here work in food banks, contribute, volunteer. We need to address the causes. And one of the fundamental causes is that relationship, which Conservatives so enjoy speaking about, the relationship between hard work and reward. That relationship has been severed. The scourge of low pay in this country is too much of a reality for many people, and it's that which we have to tackle. And so looking ahead, a Labour government would ban exploitative 0 hours contracts. We want to raise the national minimum wage. We want to incentivise companies to pay a living wage. Because the fact is, people talk about our expanding welfare bill. And that's the reason for that is that 5 million people who live in poverty in this country claiming welfare do so because the pay that they receive simply doesn't allow them to make ends meet. And it is simply not acceptable that this government has sought to try and reduce the deficit on the backs of the poor and the vulnerable without creating a fairer and more just society and allowing food banks to proliferate in this way.
It's disgraceful that in the 21st century our citizens have to resort to food banks to look after themselves and their families. But we can't get away from the fact that we have 624,000 new people coming into this country to settle here every year. They all need jobs, they all have to have wages and housing, they all want to contribute to our society, but they all need to be looked after. But this puts huge pressure on wages. The minimum wage is now often the maximum wage that people can get. I have a young student who's engaged, well, he's not young, he's 31 years old. He's been engaged to his partner for 8 years. He lives at home with his parents. She lives at home with her parents. Neither of them, she's a teacher, so she has a good job. He works as a chef in a pub, but he's on 0 hours contract. He doesn't know from one day to the next how many hours he's going to be working. He therefore has no idea how much wages, he has no consistency of wages that he takes home. We need to provide for all of our citizens. But we need controlled immigration, and then our wages can start. We can get some control. And we haven't had real wage growth in the UK for years now. And it's a disgrace.
Food banks clearly are something that we should not be proud of. But it's not something new. It's not something that was invented by this government. They were on the increase in 2010. That doesn't mean that we should accept them, but we should also need to address the causes of why people are finding not enough money in their pockets. Now, part of the issue is that we need to get more people back into work, and this government has got 1.9 million people in work. We have more people in work in this country than ever before. I don't know how many people in this room have ever queued up at a job centre. I can tell you when I did it, it was the most dispiriting experience of my life. There is no compassion in keeping people on benefits. The key is to get people out of poverty and into work. And that's why we're committing to those who are on minimum wage will never pay tax. That we get the average pay out of tax by raising the threshold. The key is dignity in work and supporting the most vulnerable.
This is a question which you may not hear at Hustings that are not at a synagogue, or you've seen, although you may have come before. So, Jonathan, I'm going to start off with you. This comes from Daniel Hennigan-Baker. They ask, why have the British parties lost their love and empathy for Israel?
I think Israel is to some extent a victim of its own success. Partly there was love of support for the underdog. And partly when we heard talk from lots of people last summer about Israel acting disproportionately, one considered what Israel did with its resources. I was in Sderot in January. Israel spent billions on its Iron Dome missile system, on shelters for its population. Hamas, on the other hand, used the concrete that was made available to it to build tunnels and located missiles in mosques and hospitals. Small wonder then that sadly, when Israel took action that inevitably had to be taken because who wouldn't take action with missiles raining down on it, the body count was unequal. And that led people to make comments about disproportionate. But as largely, I think, a result of Israel's own success. This country has a great British value of supporting the underdog. And I'm pleased to say Israel is no longer the underdog.
I think that on the day of Yom HaShoah, we don't need any reminder of the case for Israel. For those who don't know, Yom HaShoah is the Jewish day of remembering the Holocaust. And it was out of the Holocaust, of course, that the state of Israel was born. But I think part of that ambivalence, that growing ambivalence, which we must all acknowledge exists in our political culture, I think some of it arises from the sense of frustration at the lack of progress towards a two-state solution. I remember as a girl that amazing image of Yitzhak Rabin shaking hands with Yasser Arafat on the lawn of the White House. And since that day, very little progress has been made towards what I think we all want to see, two states for two peoples. And I think that if we are going to have a secure, prosperous and flourishing Israel, then yes, those friends of Israel, of which of course I am one, we need to make the case for it. But we also need to make the case and support those moderate voices who would work towards that peaceful solution.
I'm unashamedly a friend of Israel and a supporter of the Jewish community. I remember backpacking in Israel when I was young. It was one of the most wonderful holidays I've ever had, travelling all around, going through the West Bank. It was the start of the first Intifada, and we actually got attacked on the bus, and it was all quite exciting, nobody got hurt. But I'm a complete supporter of the State of Israel. The reason there has been a change is there has been a fundamental shift in the politic against Israel in our society. It's absolutely clear. And there are two prime causes, in my opinion. One is that we now have so much influence from the European Union. The European Union is fundamentally a socialist organisation. There's an index called the ADL Global Index, which measures levels of anti-Semitism around the world. It's a Jewish institution. You can look it up online. The index for Britain is 8%. If you look at the index for European countries, it's vastly higher in almost every single European country. The influence of the EU on us is huge. Also, we have invited millions of people who come from even more hostile countries to come and live in our country. So is it surprising that levels of anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli feeling has risen?
And anti-Semitism is coming from your left.
And Mike. We will have the opportunity for open questions later on.
The question was why our party has lost the love for Israel. Well, I can tell you my party hasn't lost the love for Israel. And that's why I resigned my government position so I could vote against a motion sponsored by Labour MPs in the House of Commons on a premature recognition of State of Palestine. And that's why I support the two-state solution, but peace comes through strength, not by capitulation. And that is why David Cameron has been remarkably resolute, standing shoulder to shoulder with the Israeli people and the Israeli government. It's only a Prime Minister that has to send his own troops into war,
knows how another Prime Minister has to react when defending his own people from missiles on a daily basis. I can only tell you, I can't answer for the other parties, but my party still loves Israel, and I continue to stand side by side with my Israeli friends.
I would like to say I don't think we have lost our love for Israel. I certainly haven't. The people I speak to certainly haven't. And I hope that when a certain action is criticised, in the same way we criticise Tony Blair, we criticise ourselves too. I think we do that in this country. And I think we mustn't feel that love for us has been lost when we look at ourselves objectively and decide on these things. First of all, I say I hope you don't feel we've lost that love for Israel. Now, I grew up in Northern Ireland. I was born in Belfast. I think one lucky and unlucky thing we have in this country, we have a very long history of understanding how to deal with troubled areas, how to deal with terrorism. We know it's complex. We don't want simplistic answers. This is why when I discuss this with my party, I don't want these simplistic answers like boycotting, pushing a two-state solution. A lot of it has to be decided by the people in those countries, but please don't feel love for Israel has been lost.
Thank you. So, another question which comes also from, I think, some shared values between the two communities of sponsoring this Hustings. This is from Jenny. Both the Jewish and Christian faiths look for life as a gift. How would you, if elected, seek to improve the lives of your constituents? So, Sarah, if I can start you off on that.
I think one of the themes that I keep returning to is the fact that it used to be the case that if you worked hard, you could save, you could hope to afford decent childcare, a decent home, and a decent life for you and your family. And I think that that relationship between hard work and reward has been somewhat severed under the current government. And the way in which we can improve the lives of our constituents is by restoring that relationship. We've spoken already about making housing more affordable, but we also need to restore that balance to our community institutions and the public services which hold our community together. Services such as the NHS, libraries, social care, services which under this government have experienced enormous cuts in funding, such that that support structure which holds our communities together and provides opportunity for all is no longer there, or is at very least at risk of falling away.
We need to improve the social needs, the environmental needs, the economic needs, the educational needs, and the prosperity of our people. That's how we improve people's lives and give them freedom to make the choices that they want. Under our government and our move of power towards the centralisation of power into the EU and into the European Union, we now have less and less local democracy. We have less and less control at the grassroots level of how we make those decisions on those important issues ourselves. People talk about local democracy, which is what everyone says. Every meeting you go to, everyone says they want more choice at the grassroots level. And here we are, giving more and more power away to a foreign government in Brussels. Doesn't make any sense. We need to leave the EU, we need to get back grassroots politics so that your vote counts and that the MPs you elect are accountable to you.
There are several things that I want to achieve if I'm re-elected to make life better for my constituents. That's the continuation of expanding of our local schools so that everybody has an opportunity to go to a local school which offers a high quality education, helping people save, whether they are starting out in life or whether they are thinking of giving up work at the end of their careers. Whether it's ensuring those that are on pensions continue to benefit from the inflation or average earnings, what's called the triple lock increases, so people have dignity in retirement. It's about delivering jobs and pay packets. It's about putting money in people's pockets. Whatever you want to achieve in the constituency, whether it's charitable works or compassion whatever we want from our public services. It does stem from a strong economy, and part of my job is to ensure that the economic plan we've set upon is delivered and we stay the course.
Well, it's very sad in the 6th wealthiest country in the world that we have to say the two main things people need are money in their pockets to buy food for their own families and housing, and it's terrible. I have to name those first because they need those before anything else. Also, I mean, the Green Pod, I have to mention air pollution and climate change. If we don't keep global warming below 2% and we're heading to 3 or 4%, we're seeing the effects of that. Air pollution has been, it kills 4,000 people per year in London. We need to deal with that. We've seen the effects of that this week. We would increase council tax to what it was before to put money in the hands of local councils to fund the kind of services that are going missing, like libraries and other things. And one of the things my parents fought for are free NHS, free education, affordable housing for everyone, including higher education paid for by a business education tax, raising our corporation tax to lower than other similar countries, and that would pay more than tuition fees pay at the moment, plus a grant.
In improving people's lives, I don't think this is solely a question of putting money in people's pockets. I think there is a higher ideal in giving people opportunity for control of their lives, opportunity for self-development. In that respect, education is the great enabler, which is why improving education and adequately funding education from cradle to college is such a priority for Liberal Democrats. We're also very concerned to bring back and enhance a sense of community. It's not just a question of balance of power between Whitehall and Brussels, with which Richard is so obsessed. There is many people sitting in this area think that Barnet Council, sitting up in its lofty tower in Southgate, is as remote, if not more remote, than Whitehall and Westminster. And one of the reasons why we're so disturbed with the library cuts is because libraries people can go to just sit and have a cup of coffee and read a newspaper with other people is part of our sense of community.
So, as Adam refilled thought, thank you very much. Now, there was some competition tonight politically, and this question I suspect comes from that. It's this one, and we'll start with Richard, just to give you kind of an idea where we're up to. From Paul Davis. In the literature we've received so far, only one candidate has mentioned the leader of their party. Could you let us know why this is? Richard, would you like to start?
I assume it's UKIP. However, I'm not sure. Maybe we get the answer at the end. UKIP are not afraid. Everyone knows who Nigel Farage is. I expect you know who most of the other leaders are. He is probably the most charismatic speaker, leader that this country has had for many years. We have the best manifesto. Please read it. There's a short version and there's a long version. If you want, more detail. But Nigel Farage is an incredibly charismatic leader, and that's why so many people are going to vote UKIP on the 7th of May.
I think you'll find David Cameron on all of my literature. I have no embarrassment about my party leader. He's an asset. I have to tell you, when I'm on the doorsteps, when people are thinking about who they want in number 10, who they see as Prime Minister, they see David Cameron. They see David Cameron, who has led the country and turned it around. They see a strong, resolute, battle-tested Prime Minister who can deal with the challenges of the future. I'm not embarrassed as my party leader, and I can assure you that when you get my literature, you'll find it full, square and centre.
Well, I think the main reason for that with us will be you haven't got our free post leaflet yet, because we don't take corporate sponsorship. That's why we can commit to things like cracking down on tax dodging. We can only afford to send out one free post leaflet to all of you, and our leader will be on it. We're not a top-down party, we're not a hierarchical party, we're very, very democratic. Our leader has to stand for election very regularly, and we can replace her if we have any problems with her. But you will see her on the one leaflet we can afford without putting ourselves in hock to the corporates and all of that involves.
Thank you.
I think British politics has become very presidential in recent times. From the time when you elected a House of Commons, a cabinet, and individual MPs. I'm proud, as I said in my introduction, and as we've said in our election address, which I think landed on the doormat today, courtesy of a wonderful royal mail, proud to defend the record of our government, proud to defend the record of our Deputy Prime Minister, and all our cabinet ministers. If I'd been able to get a group photo of all of them, I would have done so, but I didn't get that opportunity, unfortunately.
4 years ago, no one in this country was talking about inequality. No one in this country was talking about the fact that our energy market was rigged. No one was talking about 0 hours contracts, low pay, or the living wage. No one, even in the wake of the Bugle scandal, was talking about appropriate regulation of the media. Today, all of those issues are hot and at the forefront of our political agenda. And the reason we're talking about it is because of the sort of leadership shown by Ed Miliband. That, in my view, is the definition of leadership. It's the ability to set the political agenda. When UKIP over here talks about immigration, anti-EU, you hear David Cameron panic and offer a referendum. You hear him pander to his right. And that is the difference between being a follower and being a leader, and why I'm proud that Ed Miliband is the leader of my party.
This question comes from Deborah Wilson. We've got round to Mike, and the question quotes your name. Mike Frigga is quoted in today's Jewish news as saying a non-Jewish MP is able to represent Jewish constituents more forcefully, as they can't be accused of having a vested interest. Given accusations of dual loyalties are commonly used to silence or delegitimize Jewish voices in the public sphere, how would the candidates respond to this statement? I'd like to start with you.
I think the comments in the round, I've said for a long time, is in the House of Commons, you'll find that the most ardent arguers against the delegitimisation of Israel, anti-Semitism, any form of discrimination, you will find at the very front of that argument are non-Jewish MPs. And I pay tribute actually to the Labour MP, John Mann, who chairs, I'm the Vice President of the All-Party Group on Anti-Semitism, he's actually the chairman of it. And what you find in the political discourse, whether we like it or not, is that those of us who are not Jewish are able to argue forcefully that it's either a constituency issue or something we believe in passionately. And that's what I stand up for, is I can say with my hand on my heart when I'm fighting against anti-Semitism, it's what I believe in, and it's also what my constituents believe in. Being able to have that strong blend of a constituency and personal interest places me in a strong position to fight for my Jewish constituents.
I would actually never say a thing like that, because I think we should vote for the candidate who we feel represents us best and the policies that represent us best. I haven't heard this before, but I would certainly vote for a Jewish candidate. I would actually like to see more Orthodox Jewish candidates in Parliament. I think that's missing. Having spent time on this Hustings, I think the dark horse among us is Jonathan Davis. I don't think I should take into account, is he from my religion or not. We should vote for the person who represents us and whose policies represent us. A politician should be able to rise above that and be objective and represent everybody.
When a long time ago there was a debate in Parliament about whether to admit Jews as MPs, the great Liberal peer Lord Macaulay said, it's not about Jews representing Jews or Christians representing Christians. It's about having a Parliament of Jews and Christians to represent a country of Jews and Christians. There is a large Jewish population in this constituency. There's also a large Muslim population, a large Hindu population, a large Christian population, and a large atheist population. And whoever is selected or elected as your Law MP will bring their values, and I will bring my Jewish values into politics. But whoever is elected will represent and must represent the entirety of this constituency, whatever their religious views.
Like Jonathan, if I'm elected as the MP for Finchley Golders Green, then I look forward to representing those of all faiths and of no faiths. It's part of the power of politics that I think one can use one's identity, channel one's values to inform the politics and the campaigns that one pursues, but also to transcend those barriers. And I don't think that a Jewish MP would represent the interests of the constituents of Finchley and Golders Green, including the large Jewish community, any less effectively than would a non-Jewish MP.
We have a wonderful, diverse and tolerant society, and I think we've moved on from this sort of attitude. I've lived and worked all around the world in many different cultures and societies and enjoyed all of them. My own family, half of my own family is from Europe and Asia as well. But if you take any good thing you can imagine, like the police, the NHS, climate change, house building, take any good thing you can think of, it needs to be controlled. We need a controlled NHS, we need controlled house building, we need control of our carbon output so we can protect our environment. And similarly, we need control of our immigration policy and control of our borders. We absolutely need this in order to keep the beautiful and diverse communities that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, our next question comes from Lord Stanley Clinton Davis, and this one begins with you, Adele. Would the panel agree that Britain's interests are far better served by our playing an active role in the European Union, and thus enabling the positive aspects of collective decision-making to be made?
Yes, well, thank goodness when I'm first, it's really good. On question time, they get these questions in advance, we don't. But yes, the Green Party is for a referendum. I think a referendum is very expensive, it's a lot of work to do, but I would actually rather that we had another way of people getting very well informed on Europe, all of the pros and cons. I think we really need that. I'm in general pro-Europe. I think there'd be a lot of pain if we left Europe, but there are certain disadvantages at the moment, like the transatlantic trade and investment partnership, which would be one thing that could make me vote against it. But I do feel we can negotiate these things. We have good MEPs who are interested in Europe who can negotiate those for us, and I'm very positive about that.
I could simply answer the question yes, but that would be too simple. It is worth remembering why the European Union was founded. It was founded to stop future wars between France and Germany. Spain wanted to join it to come within the democratic framework of nations. The former East European communist nations and the Baltic states were desperate to join it to mark their readmission to the democratic world. Firstly, Europe is a great source for liberal, progressive, democratic, and dare I say it, British values. And secondly, through free trade agreements, through the freedom of services, through the ability that it gives British companies, including foreign companies who, because of Europe, choose to locate in the UK, it is an enormous source of prosperity and jobs to this city, and to this country and this city. And finally, there are a number of issues like crime, like the environment and global warming and pollution, which operate on a global basis and to which we need to respond on a global basis.
I too want to see us remain within the EU. I referred earlier to the Holocaust, which we're marking the 70-year anniversary of today. And again, one needs no better reminder for why we have shared institutions. And in politics, there are many problems which we share. One thinks of the problems of climate change, which doesn't respect national borders. And when we have shared problems, we need a shared and collective multilateral approach to tackling them. Here we have on our doorstep our biggest trading partners. Thousands of jobs in this country depend on our membership of the EU. It's what allows us to compete with the rest of the world. And yet, despite saying that they weren't going to use this Parliament obsessing about the EU, that is precisely what the Conservatives have done. 2 years of uncertainty would be bad for business. That's what business leaders tell us. The EU brings us economic, social, cultural, and environmental benefits. And if we want to reform it, we have to be in it to reform it.
Can you hear me? I need to stand up for this one. There are 28 countries in the EU. 4 of them run it. Sorry, 4 of them pay for it. Germany, Italy, France, and Britain. 8 of them are roughly neutral. The rest all have their heads in the trough. And so the EU is, you can't reform the club if most of the members like it is. That is just fact. David Cameron and various people talk about reforming the EU. You cannot reform the EU. They like it is. As for NATO, it is NATO that has defended our country since the Second World War. It was NATO that faced off against the Soviet threat. It has nothing to do with the EU. Our security was guaranteed by the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organisation. The EU may have been benevolent once, when we joined the common market. It has evolved into a much more sinister organisation. There are all sorts of laws being created, such as TTIP, which you may have heard of, which are threatening our National Health Service and all sorts of things. The parties here won't even let you have a referendum, some of the parties here. They won't even let you choose.
I think the question was about whether being part of the EU is going to give us real power. And clearly the answer to that is yes. But actually, the first time I actually agreed with Richard, actually it's also part of our economic power and our membership of NATO. It's not just the EU, but that's an important part of it. But we can reform our relationship. There is an appetite for reform, whether it's from Angela Merkel or whether it's across into the Netherlands countries. But you can do that by collaboration and then giving you the say. It's about time we allowed you to have your say on the kind of Europe we want to be in. I think we'll vote to stay in. I think it's a good thing for this country. It's certainly a good thing for London. And I have to tell you, it's not causing uncertainty. The economic investment in this country, since we've been talking about referendum, has never been higher. In fact, it's higher than the whole of the rest of Europe combined. So we can reform, and we can give you a say, and we can keep our seat at the table.
So the next question is an issue that I know has been debated and presented on both in the synagogue and in the church. We're going to begin with Jonathan. And it's this one. This comes from Vicky Fogel. If you are elected, would you work with Citizens UK and other organisations to end indefinite detention of migrants?
And indeed, the Liberal Democrats have worked to put legislation forward on that point. The way in which migrants are treated as criminals, is absolutely wrong. The way in which immigrant children were held in detention was a scandal which we stopped early in the coalition government. The slowness of the immigration decision-making process is also something that must be addressed. But I think the short answer to the question is a firm yes.
May I start by praising the work of citizens, not just on this issue, but on issues around care worker pay, the living wage, and social housing. And I think the fact that our community groups here in Barnet are working with citizens is to be applauded. On the specific question of indefinite detention, the simple answer is, would Labour end it? Yes, we would. And I think that this scandal of how we treat migrants and people in our prisons needs to be looked at in a broader context. Because it was a Labour government that introduced the Human Rights Act, and it is the Conservatives, if elected, who are threatening to scrap an essential piece of legislation which, speaking as a lawyer, I know across a range of issues protects individual rights, civil liberties, And it's that and those values that I will be campaigning for in this election.
There are two types of migrants. There are genuine asylum seekers, and then there are economic migrants. It is the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, and this supposed wonderful Human Rights Act that actually forces these people to be kept in jail for years, because there's appeal after appeal after appeal, and British courts no longer have the jurisdiction to make decisions and them to be carried out, so that people are either imprisoned if they've committed some offences, or they're allowed to stay in the country because they have genuine asylum needs, or they are repatriated. It is the European Court of Human Rights and the Human Rights Act that allows endless cycles of appeal where these people appeal again and again and again, and whilst that happens they are kept in prison for years. And it is truly shocking, yes it is, but it is these human rights regulations that are intended to look after our citizens and protect us that are actually the cause of the problem. If British judges could make their decisions like they used to, it would be decided, it would be clear-cut, and everything would be solved. These people would no longer be in prison.
Having spent dealing with casework of people who have been lost in the system for years, even decades, waiting for decision, the key is about having a speedy system of decision-making. Having the huge backlog that we inherited has led to people being left in limbo for many, many years. And detention is used across the world. It sounds a horrible word. It's where people are held while they're being assessed as to their right to enter the UK. The key is making sure that people have a quick decision. That's streamlining the process, making sure that there isn't an appeal after appeal after appeal. So it is about making sure it's fair, it's just and speedy. So people know that they can stay and then they don't have to be detained, or they have no right to be in the UK and they have to be removed as fast as possible. You can be compassionate, but you also have to be firm and swift.
Yes, the simple answer is yes, we would end this. The indefinite detention of migrants, this is indefinite and if it's the wrong thing. It does have to be judged faster. As Mike said, the Human Rights Act also important, as Sarah said. I was talking to somebody, loads of things, and he said, bizarrely, I got married in Italy and came back to this country, and to show how awful it is, because I came back with a foreign surname and my family are British for decades, I was treated as an asylum seeker, so I know how it feels. I've had to go into rooms with these people. I was treated as an asylum seeker. I learned to put my British surname back, and the way we treat people here is appalling, and I was treated like it too. So, and migration leads to economic benefits, as we know if you look at the UCL study, the amount of tax they pay is far higher than the benefits they pay. It's helped the economic recovery, so all sorts of benefits to migration. But indefinite detention, no.
Thank you. Okay, so this question is going to begin with Sarah, and because we're now running out of time for the pre-written questions, I'm going to do a bit of aggregating. And then if you find your pre-written question has sadly not had the chance to be put, I apologise for that because we have more than we can put, then when we get to the open questions in about 7 or 8 minutes time, then please feel welcome to put that question again. So, this is an aggregation. So, despite the media telling us that crime is less than it was 2 years ago, what can you bring to your constituency to make people feel more protected, specifically from racist abuse, which goes together with a question which asks this, that this synagogue could look more like a fortress than a house of prayer. How will the candidates' policies make the community feel more secure?
I think that's still working. Can people hear me? Yeah. We've seen under this government, as part of the programme of public spending cuts, that policing, not just nationwide, but particularly here in Barnet, has been cut back and has suffered. And I know because I wrote to the borough commander here in Barnet and requested to go out on an area patrol, which was a fascinating experience. I went out with a couple of police officers and we even got to experience, putting on the blue light. But more important than that, on a serious note, it was speaking to those frontline officers and hearing about the way in which neighbourhood policing has been cut back from 9 officers per neighbourhood to 2, how that's putting them under enormous pressure and preventing them from doing the sort of community policing that we want to see. Now, Labour would scrap the wasteful police and crime commissioners, reinvest that money in neighbourhood policing. We also need to firm up our approach to hate crime, strengthening legislation. But I'll tell you one thing. Yes, it's important that we have organisations such as the CST, and I really applaud their work. But really, if we want to keep this community safe, then we need to have more frontline police.
It's the same old promises before the election. Everyone's going to give you more police on the beat, and it never ever happens. Of course, crime has not gone down. The police don't record half the crimes that actually happen anymore. If you get burgled, it's almost impossible to get. You have to beg and borrow and steal a crime number off them. If an old lady gets mugged in her own home and a young criminal gets caught, he may get 6 months in jail. He will only have to serve 3 months of that. It's truly shocking. We need proper sentencing for criminals. We need them to serve the full sentences that they are given unless there are particularly special reasons why they should not. We shouldn't have automatic halving of sentences. We need to get back to a bit more common sense in our police service. Sure, we need more police on the beat, but don't believe what they tell you, because that's what always they say. We now have foreign police. We now have to employ foreign police in London because we have so many foreign criminals and gangs coming here from other countries because we have EU open borders and we can't stop these people coming in.
Mike?
There's 2 parts, I think, to the question I was being asked. One is about crime. Crime is down 20%, and it's about how you use the resources that have been given to you, not just about physical numbers and the size of the budget, and our reforms on the police service have proven that. And actually in Barnet we have 54 extra warranted police officers on the beat because some of the back office staff has now been centralised into the Met rather than being done locally, so we've got more warranted officers on the streets. But the other issue is about the fortress that surrounds many synagogues. And the key to that is about not just the harsh penalties to those who actually perpetrate the hate crimes, but it's also about trying to work on changing the attitudes. And one of the reports I was involved in was your party report on anti-Semitism and the work we've done on trying to combat the attitudes on social media. That's the weak link where people can post videos and comments on hate crime and get away with it. So there's 2 parts to the question and there's 2 parts to dealing with it.
I agree again about the cuts, and we put more of the funding in the hands of local authorities to deal with that. I think we can hear that crime is down, but you and I know when we go out we're seeing more crime. So what is the reason for that? I know my street, very quiet street in Golders Green, I never used to see crime, and then in 1 week I saw 3 serious crimes. I rescued a woman who was running down the street screaming in her night clothes with a man chasing her. The police came to my house, they wouldn't believe her, they told her not to report it because she would never get it through in court. I told them I was a journalist and they dealt with it. The reason we have crime figures down is because people aren't reporting it anymore because of this situation I just told you. I told them that that was what it was like in the 1970s. We were told not to report crimes. There is more crime, so we do need more police, we do need to see to it. With prejudice, we do have to take hate crime seriously. We have to deal with education on prejudice from a very early age. That's the way to get rid of it. I hope it doesn't feel too dangerous. I live in Northern Ireland, I hope it never feels that dangerous. And the kind of work done by this synagogue in integrating faiths. And some people have asked me to twin schools to try and get integration and learn from an early age.
I think the biggest causes of crime are drug addiction and mental illness. And if we actually want to address crime seriously, what we want to do is not throw people into jail and throw the key away, but we want to address those 2 causes. And we want to address questions of reoffending. We want to ensure that mental health is properly treated within the health service and not as a criminal justice issue, and that drug offending is treated as an illness rather than a crime. Dealing with other issues of crime, I believe the statistics and the crime is down under this government. I think I come back to one of my little bugbears, the police shop in Golders Green Road that is never open, which seems an absolute total waste of time on the part of presumably ultimately Boris Johnson, because that is the Metropolitan Police, because that is the Metropolitan Police Service. On the issues regarding the Jewish community and the CST, to put on record the work done on the financial support given by the coalition government to security for the CST for schools and synagogues, and to comment that bad and horrible though the situation may be here, it is far better than in many other countries in Europe.
We're going to be able to manage one more of the written questions. There's also one of the written questions, so we can do very, very quickly, because this is a question for the audience. So we'll see how this goes. Basically, we're going to ask you to put your hand up for very important, somewhat important, somewhat unimportant, or completely unimportant. Okay? So that's the spectrum. And the question to ask the audience that a person has put here is this: how important a factor in your selection of a party to support is its attitude towards Israel? So the question is that very important? Is it somewhat important? Mostly or somewhat unimportant, or very unimportant? So, if you reckon it's very important, pop your hand up. If you reckon it's somewhat important, if you reckon it is somewhat unimportant, if you reckon it is very unimportant, okay, thank you. So, candidates, that's a helpful thing for finishing the Golders Green constituency. Thank you. Okay, now a question to the candidates. And so this is the last one we're going to go through from here, but please, if your question wasn't asked, please feel welcome to ask it with your hand up, and I will try to pull you out if I can see you have a written question. So, our question is this, and we start with Richard. How can local authorities improve services in a time of austerity?
Why are we in austerity? That's the first question. Maybe we shouldn't be. The European Union costs us £170 billion every year. There's an economic report, there's an economic cost-benefit analysis being done by a professor, an economics professor called Tim Congdon, who used to advise the previous Conservative government. You can look him up. This is on our website. I've asked many an economist that I can find. Please take a look at this. Tell me where it's flawed. This economics professor has estimated. It's very hard to find a proper cost-benefit analysis of the cost of the European Union. This gentleman estimates it costs £170 billion every year. That is 11% of our GDP. I've repeatedly asked the candidates here to find an economist who can contradict this. Why are we in austerity? Maybe we shouldn't be in the EU, and we would have £170 billion extra every year to spend on our vital services that we all so much need.
The key is about not getting hung up about who provides it, but about what we want to be provided. It's about ensuring that the people who provide our public services deliver the public service at the quality we want, to the standard we want, at the price we can afford. Whether that's in-house, whether that's with the private sector, or whether that's the charitable sector. All I'm doing is ensuring that my constituents get quality services at the most affordable price. I'm not going to put ideology in front of who should be that provider. But one thing I did start when I was leader of the council up until 2009, I accept it's a few years ago now, is about getting the public sector in Barnet to work together. Share offices, share back offices, share expertise, share customers, share costs, so we can provide high quality, locally responsible services within the budget.
We're an anti-austerity party, we don't believe in it. A friend of mine on his email says it's not austerity, it's robbery. We're one of the 6 wealthiest countries. If there's a time of austerity, why was the tax on people who earn more than £150,000, why was it reduced from 50p to 45p in the pound if we're at a time of austerity? Why is even Labour boasting that they're going to keep corporation tax at the lowest in the G7 countries if we're at a time of austerity and money could be raised from that. If we're at a time of austerity, why are we building HS2, which people, the high-speed rail link, which is doing so much damage and people don't want it in Camden and Newton, and people up north don't want it because they say we'll just suck even more to London. If we're at a time of austerity, how can we afford to give all this money to the rich and spend it on these things while we're going to squeeze the poor even more if it's another Conservative government from welfare cuts? I don't believe it's austerity, I believe it's a bluff.
At the time of the local elections last year, just before the local elections, the Conservative council tax for the princely sum of 21 pence a week. And we warned that that would lead to public spending cuts. Lo and behold, what happened? Proposals to close libraries at Charles Hill and East Finchley. Mayor of London Boris Johnson insists on reducing the London council tax precept. Result, doesn't have the money for prudential borrowing to address issues of affordable housing in London. There were choices local councils make, and there were those same choices being made at national level by George Osborne, who wants to cut inheritance tax and views that as a greater priority than adequately funding our schools.
40%.
I'm surprised that Mike should suggest that ideology is not important when you consider who the provider is, because I consider that it's an ideological commitment that private is good and public is bad, which led to the One Barnet experiment. And indeed, where you have taxpayer money being funneled to a single profit-making company, which is responsible for delivering the bulk of the services here in Barnet, then that doesn't seem to me to be driven by what is value for money, by what is going to deliver the best possible services. It seems to me to be something that's delivered, that's driven by ideology. And politics is about choices. And we've seen here in Barnet starkly illustrated the sorts of choices that Conservative councils make. Trying to cut spending by cutting disability services, by cutting libraries. Contrast that with Labour councils in Islington and Camden, which even in a time of austerity have managed to introduce a living wage and deliver more affordable housing. Politics is about choices, and if you want to see the difference between Labour principles and Conservative principles, look at Barnet and look at Islington and Camden.
So that takes us, I think, big So that takes us now to the opportunity for open questions from the floor. Adam, who you can see at the back with the pink shirts making him stand out nicely, has the radio mic and will bring it to you. We do ask you to hold the radio mic about here. He'll make sure it's on, and Alex will make sure that you're amplified appropriately. So hopefully this should work. We'll have as many questions as we can take. What we are going to do is Rex is going to face up to the challenge of keeping everyone to 30 seconds so that we can get as many questions through as possible. If we find that that's not really working, we'll go back to a minute. We'll see how we go. Oh yes, the question definitely 30 seconds as well. That's very important. Thank you. So, please, and our intention is to go to about 5 to 10. So, first person who would like to ask a question, whatever you want. Okay, please, Lucy. It's a lady with the blue card.
Thank you for coming. This is very linked to the last question. You've all got great ideas of sort of where you'll spend money if your party got into government, but you need to have money to spend money. Which do you think is the best place if your party got into power, where you'll get the money from?
So where do you get the money from, Mike?
Well, the government has no money of its own. It only gets money from you, or from businesses. And all the evidence suggests is that the low-tax economies are the ones that deliver the best economies, deliver the best tax receipts, which are able to deliver the best public services. So a strong economy is where you'll get the money, through growth. If you get the economy growing, people are in work. If they're in work, they pay taxes. Businesses pay their taxes. If you want strong public services, you need a strong economy.
Thank you.
The Institute of Fiscal Studies has done research. They've shown that under this government, the money has been taken from the poor and it's gone to the rich. They started off with this tax at 50p a pound for people earning more than £150,000. We would raise that to the amount that Margaret Thatcher had it at, which was 60p We shouldn't have the lowest corporation tax in the whole of the G7 countries. If we're in a time of austerity, we would raise the level of corporation tax still lower than others. In that, we would also avoid crackdown on tax dodging, which we can because we're not taking sponsorship from the corporates.
We absolutely must address questions of tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance, and Danny Alexander and the Treasury has put a lot of additional resource into HMRC to do that. We must also ensure that the tax burden is spread fairly, and in particular on capital as well as income. Generally, income is a good thing, which we want to encourage. Capital, which we want to encourage. To have income taxed more heavily than capital increases opportunity for avoidance and evasion, and generally puts a higher burden on those least able to afford it.
I think in order to restore trust in politics, you've heard a lot of us make promises and saying what we would do. And one of the ways that we do that is precisely as you say, is to level with the public about the difficult choices ahead, about how we're going to pay for these things. And that is precisely why Labour's manifesto, the entirety of its manifesto, is fully costed. Because you would have heard from the Conservatives that their long-term economic plan is working. But you've also heard in the last couple of weeks that we're going to get an additional £8 billion for the NHS. We're going to get £6.5 billion to raise the personal allowance, billions of pounds to achieve a rail price freeze. And none of that is explaining how it's going to be paid for. We would do so through progressive taxation and capital investment to get our country back on its feet.
All these parties are rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. Meanwhile, a lifeboat floats along. It's called Getting Out of the EU. We are sleepwalking into a European superstate, which is run by big business and the German Bundesbank. Look at Greece stuck in the euro. The same people who told us that we had to be in the euro tell us that we have to be in the EU. It is complete nonsense. It is totally untrue, and we would save £170 billion every year if we left. Please check this document. If anyone can find any flaws with it, let me know.
One of the things I should say, some of the questions which I wasn't able to put were ones which were to particular candidates. So please, again, do feel welcome to put those questions if you wish to, and we'll start with the candidate that you wish to put. Gentleman at the back.
Why should I, as an observant Jew who's a Zionist, vote for UKIP, who did a U-turn on Shakita, vote for Labour, where their leader seems to have as much problem with his Jewishness as he's able to eat a bacon sandwich, with the Liberal Democrats, who have a member of Parliament, and I believe his name is David Ward, who has made comments that are bordering on the obscene regarding Israel, with the Greens, who do not agree with the non-stunning of animals before Shakita. Originally that was your policy, and also in your policy, your manifesto yesterday have said they want to end the trade agreement with Israel, the EU trade agreement with Israel.
Okay, so I think we'll look to the four candidates, perhaps let's let them go, and then Mike, of course, you can as well. I think we should, we're due actually to start with Adele, if we go, since everybody's been asked, and then we will come to Richard as we go.
Coming from this area, when I saw that in the newspaper myself about the non-stunning, I got straight in touch with our animal spokesperson, and that wasn't our policy. For some reason in the newspapers where they reported on UKIP and having that policy against non-stunning of animals, somehow they lumped the Greens in with it. And that hasn't been our policy. And so we look at the welfare of the animal all the way through a slaughterhouse. We like CCTV to look at that, but we don't have that policy. I've looked in depth at how other countries deal with the compromise on perhaps simultaneous stunning. We're not a top-down party. I would be your voice in Parliament, obviously. So on the other issue, you say we're not a whipped party, and we would discuss it, and I can vote and argue against it. I can argue against that. I don't have to go along with it.
I'm so sorry, we'll have to move on. So
David Ward is one maverick Liberal Democrat MP who has never spoken for the party on issues of Israel, the Middle East or international affairs. As Vice Chair of Liberal Democrat Friends of Israel, I urged our party leadership to take stronger action against him, but he is one MP out of many who has spoken some obnoxious things but does not speak for the party, and sadly it has to be said, every political party has individuals within it who have said some very unfortunate things about Israel and the East.
Did you refuse to remove the wit from him? If you got more.
So,
I'm James Tom.
he's no longer a Liberal Democrat.
And Taylor, MEP. Excellent.
So there sounds like there may be additional questions to be asked later. That's fine, we'll ask these additional questions. So,
I reject the suggestion that Ed Miliband has any problem with his Jewishness. I certainly have no problem with mine. Ed Miliband has spoken eloquently of the experience of his parents who fled persecution in Europe and came to this country. Yes, they were secular Jews. Perhaps you're measuring his Jewish identity by your own Orthodox standards. That wasn't his upbringing. But in fact, he made his only visit, international visit as an opposition leader to Israel. He's spoken up in favour of religious freedoms, including Shakita, and I'm proud to be a member of his party. And I certainly, as an MP, if elected as an MP for this area, would have no problem identifying with a Jew, and as a member of the Labour Party.
Nigel Farage is on record from many years back. UKIP have never been for banning Shakita. We never will be, and it never was UKIP policy.
It was UKIP policy. You reversed it 3 days later.
No, that's not true. There was a vote of the NEC, and 8 people. UKIP was also not whipped. There was a vote of the NEC where 8 people voted when there was not a full quorum, and that was picked up by the anti-UKIP press and spun in the usual way. The trade deal with UKIP are not against banning Shakita. The trade deal with Israel that everyone is against is just one more symptom of the rise in anti-Semitism. We need to get rid of political correctness. All these parties voted to support the Palestinian state. UKIP is probably the most pro-Israel party that there is.
Right. And Michael, there was almost equal opportunity questioning there, not quite to you.
That's talk to them, sir, in more detail.
In terms of the specific question to you, sir, as an Orthodox Jew, my record on Shahita, on anti-Semitism, on delivering on security funding, I think is unimpeachable. But it's also about combating discrimination wherever it is. I'm also a member of the All-Party Group on Islamophobia. Anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are 2 sides of the same coin. I stand up against all forms of religious discrimination, and I stand up for all forms of religious freedom.
We're ready for the next question. Douglas, please.
Strong criticism of Israel last July.
If it's a question you'd like to ask, please do so next round.
It's essentially to Mike Freer, and that is that whilst I welcome our membership of the EU, I am concerned at the intransigence of certain EU members and the stated policy of the current EU president to delay negotiations on changing some of the terms of our membership, which David Cameron wishes to do. And I want to know what David Cameron can do between now and 2017 to enable the terms to be renegotiated.
So, since this was addressed to Mike, can you start us off?
The bottom line is that for the past couple of years, every minister of government, when they're dealing with their European counterparts, have been building alliances and finding common cause. And you'll see that predominantly with Angela Merkel. But the bottom line on EU reform, I have to say, if you grab people by the budgets, their minds will follow. And we're the second biggest contributor. They will not want us to leave the EU. They'll give in on reform.
Well, I'm assuming with each of these that some of you may well also have comments you want to make. If you don't, if there's nothing particularly we can say on it, that's absolutely fine.
Was it how we have
So, Douglas, if you would just like to just summarise your question, please. Just do a quick re-summary.
I think I know what you can say on this, but anyway. I was going to say that I welcome a referendum. I think that the British people should be able to choose that in 1974, the early 70s when it was last put to the British people, it was put as a common market. And marketplace where we could all trade, and things have moved on since then. I want to know what the other party candidates have to say about their membership or otherwise of the EU, and how we can renegotiate terms to be as favourable as possible for the British people.
Yes, I do believe we can renegotiate that as Mike does. I'm happy with most things in the EU. The thing I'm most worried about transatlantic trade investment partnership with America, which would mean us having to have a common standard with America on things like genetically modified food that's to a low standard, like bleaching chickens, to sell it, that kind of privatisation, and then being able to sue our government legally if we have a financial effect on it. But I do believe we can negotiate that.
Just picking up on the question of negotiations. Within Europe, Labour are part of Socialist International or Socialist group. The Liberals are part of a European-wide liberal group. The Conservatives isolated themselves, contrary to the wishes of their European parliamentary group, by withdrawing from the main right-wing group in Europe in the European Parliament. The Conservatives, because of some of, and I don't think this is Mike personally, but because of some of his fellow MPs' dogma, have isolated themselves in Europe, and it'll be interesting to see if they can reverse that.
The Conservatives have isolated themselves in Europe. They've antagonised our European partners through their anti-European rhetoric. Our Prime Minister has virtually been absent in critical European decision-making, such as the EU's response on Ukraine. And I simply think if you're not at the table, then you cannot hope to realistically have a loud voice, a forceful voice in that renegotiation. And I think to say we'll have a referendum without saying on which side of that referendum you're going to campaign is frankly a little bit irresponsible.
How many times do they have to tell David Cameron that there is nothing to negotiate? There will be no negotiation. There will be no reform. There will be just less democracy, and there will be more uncontrolled immigration. And the consequences of that, as I'm sure this community knows, will be an ever-continuing rise in anti-Semitism. Just in case you didn't realise, UKIP will solve this problem by leaving the EU. We believe in Britain. We hope you do too. UKIP will trade with the world. Nobody's isolating themselves. UKIP will trade with the world. We will trade with Europe. We will trade with our Commonwealth friends. And we will make ourselves all much more prosperous with our friends in Europe. Thank you.
So the question, I can see a gentleman there. Adam, if you could go to him, please, when we keep up.
This is directed to Ms. Sackman. Ms. Sackman, how on earth can anybody have confidence in your party leader on the economy, given that under the last government, indeed his record with Ed Balls when he worked in the Treasury, amongst others, they bankrupt this country. So how on earth can we have confidence in him?
The reason that we have such a large deficit, and it's a deficit that persists, and the reason that we have such a large national debt is because of a global banking crisis. And the clue is in the title, a global banking crisis caused by the banks. In 2007, directly before that banking crisis affected our economy, as a percentage of GDP, our national debt and our national deficit was actually lower than we inherited in 1997. Just so to suggest that the deficit and the debt was caused by necessary investment in schools and hospitals is simply a false analysis. The crisis and the recession was caused by the banks.
It is absolutely true that Labour bankrupted the economy. Of course there was a banking crisis, but why? It's because Gordon Brown took away all the regulations and allowed the banks to do what banks would do if you take away all their regulations. Just like the chemical industry or the oil industry, if you took away all their regulations, what do you think they would do to the environment? That's why we have regulations. It was Labour who bankrupted us. It was Gordon Brown who took away the regulations. Everybody knows this. They even left a note saying there's no money left. That tells you everything you need to know about Labour and the economic situation.
International corruption, not UK corruption.
very easy to say it's all the bankers' fault. Clearly the banks had a part to play. But the fault is the Labour government have not yet apologised for spending money they didn't have. They didn't just spend my money or your money, they spent your children's money and your grandchildren's money. They spent not just the bank, they need to apologise.
I think it's very easy to score points on this, but as people have been saying, it was an international crisis. It was the banks that been worried. Maybe there was deregulation, but they haven't been regulated enough again, so it could happen again. There is still this danger. And I don't go for this argument of why was money spent investing in the country. The way to bring an economy out of a recession is to invest. It's not like your money at home where I don't have much money this week, I'll not spend much. That causes a downward spiral. You have to invest, you put a minimum wage in the hands of the poor if they have to spend it into our economy. That's one of the first ways to get a country out of a recession. You have to invest in order to have a recovery, and immigration has also helped our recovery, as is known. The UCL, if you look it up, they've paid far more in tax than taking benefits.
I'm afraid I don't think Sarah can simply blame it on the, quote, global banking crisis as she does, for two reasons, one of which has already been referred to. The first is the way in which the Labour government under Gordon Brown deregulated the banks, and the second is the way in which the Labour government stoked up the housing market and stoked up credit, creating the bubble which inevitably was then going to burst.
That gets us, well, so I'm going to ask you to use it as an answer to another question. That will be fine. So, can we have a next question, please? This lady in the second row.
I'd like to ask.
So, would you wait for the microphone, please, so that people with hearing aid can hear?
This is for Sarah. Do you regret Ed Miliband's stance on Syria?
I believe that not doing something has as much of a consequence as doing something. I don't regret that this country avoided a headlong rush into conflict without a plan for how that conflict would be managed and what the purpose and the objectives would be. So to that extent, I do not regret the opposition that he bravely, I think, the opposition that he offered at that time. But what I do regret is the humanitarian crisis that we see unfolding in Syria, and I do regret this government's poor record on accepting refugees from Syria to this country and pouring humanitarian aid into the region.
UKIP was the only party that totally opposed Syrian involvement in Syria and opposed the bombing of it. All the other parties wanted to go in and bomb Syria. Yes, they did. It was totally unnecessary. It was totally unnecessary. We have to stop interfering in endless foreign wars that do not contribute to our safety. We were involved in Iraq, 2 wars in Iraq, which was based on lies. Everyone knows all the other conflicts we've been in. We have got to stop interfering. We have also got to stop cutting our armed forces. All these parties have cut our armed forces to the bone. Without security, we have nothing.
The difficulty with the debate and the vote is that the flip-flopping on the night where we weren't able to get support for the Prime Minister to take a view on what was the best course of action, and it actually explicitly, from memory, ruled out boots on the ground. What it has done is it's hamstrung our ability to support those people fighting IS on the ground. That inability to get the vote through has meant we've not been able to provide arms and support to those who are doing our fighting for our freedoms against IS.
These were the same people they wanted to give weapons to. It's monstrous.
Yes, I mean, I think the way the vote went just showed how fed up people are with conflict, and it isn't always the best way. It's a last resort. And we know, I read a very interesting article in the newspapers about the way that Cameron has kept going for conflict. It doesn't always appeal to the public, and how the way he goes for conflict is one of the reasons for increasing in hate crimes. So we have to watch that. We would work with the wider international community to end insurgency and sectarianism in Iraq, Syria and other states by require provision of logistical support to local populations and ethnic groups resisting totalitarianism. So recognise that non-regional or indigenous ground troops will never be conducive to long-term stability, and we will continue to provide humanitarian support for those displaced by conflict. That's our main message.
I suspect the vote on Syria was in penance for the decision of Tony Blair to invade Iraq. Having made that mistake, having made one mistake, were they making a second mistake? But when one says that this doesn't affect us, I think it's also worth just commenting on the situation in Libya, where we took the reverse decision to the decision we took on Syria, and we did become involved in airstrikes. We are now seeing, sadly, a failed regime, and we're seeing the consequences of that with absolutely tragic effects on the Mediterranean this week. Sadly, as that demonstrates, none of these are easy solutions.
So, we have now just 10 minutes left to go. So, gentleman there, Adam, the gentleman in the third row who's made a few comments through the evening, I said, please ask a question, please do. Please use the microphone because there are some people using our hearing.
We have two lawyers on the panel here, Sackman, Davis and Company, and Tony Blair was a lawyer. That's enough to remember for a lifetime. Now, I can cast my mind back 17, 18 years. She was a chemist as well. I'm casting my mind back now 17 years when I was sorry? Yeah. I've cast my mind back 18 years and I was at the local council, and the Liberal candidate got up and suggested that they should slap a £10 charge on excess rubbish from the shops. The shops already pay 45% of the rent. And this is the candidate who puts himself forward to be a Member of Parliament.
So as a question out of that is, are we willing to pick up the question from that? Okay, that's fine. So let's now take a further question now. There's a gentleman there who is close to where Leon is with his camera, and so if you'd like to just take the microphone over, please.
This is a question for Mr. King. Are you aware that if this country had lived under his immigration policies, that this hall would probably be one-third full, two-thirds empty, because the ancestors of the people here would have been refused access by UKIP?
UKIP wants to control immigration policy. And this country is the most tolerant country in the world. We've always welcomed people from overseas, from asylum, and people from the Jewish community have been coming here for years. We have no intention of changing any of that whatsoever.
Are you saying we don't have an immigration policy?
Of course we have an immigration policy, sir. We want to have control over our borders so we can choose who comes here, and that means deciding whether they're genuine asylum seekers or whether they're just pure economic refugees. Political, well, the definition of political refugee is a bit vague. Currently, there are refugees who are here under the asylum rules, and there are economic refugees and the Romanian. I don't know what if a political refugee comes because he's claiming he's been persecuted, possibly justifiably, he will be looked at by the British courts, and they will make a sensible decision, like it has always been done.
Mike, if you would like to say something.
My view on this is very straightforward. If anybody just talks to the person next to them, they'll find either their new arrivals are 1 or 2 or 3 generations away from being an immigrant themselves. Immigration is a power for good, and the key issue on those fleeing persecution is this country has a proud record of giving haven to those fleeing persecution, and I would not wish to dismantle that.
I totally agree with that. I celebrate immigration. This area is built on immigration, and UCL studies and others have shown that the tax paid by immigrants far outweighs the benefits claimed. So it's helped the economic recovery. It's interesting, Alex Salmond, one of the reasons he was worried was that he wants more immigration to go to Scotland. We do need to share the benefits of immigration and work on things people are worried about, like overcrowded houses and people losing jobs, because we need a minimum wage and regulation of landlords so that we don't we can legislate against the problems people have.
John?
I think it is very regrettable that throughout this general election we have heard rhetoric from UKIP, and I have to say, Mike, I fully agree with the answer you just gave a moment ago, but we've heard similar to UKIP rhetoric from some members of the Conservative Party. We've heard rhetoric which reminisces though the rhetoric we heard in 1906 and 1905 on the Aliens Act, when it was keep out, 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 when it was keep out the Jews. The suggestion that you blame everything on Europe or blame everything on foreigners is, I think, totally unacceptable.
I, like those to the right of me, agree that the diversity, which I think captures so much of what London and what this community is our strength. We know that immigrants are net contributors to our economy, but they also enrich our social and cultural life, and as someone suggested, many of the people in this room would not be here but for that policy. But I must say, some of the rhetoric simply does not match up to the reality of this government, because we've seen policies which have piloted having go-home vans driving around North London, have made it more difficult for foreign students to apply and come here. And I think what we want to see is a smarter immigration policy which encourages immigration and celebrates that diversity, not just in rhetoric, but also in reality.
I think we are probably at about the final question of the evening, unfortunately. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to put this to somebody who's already asked questions. So the woman at the back in front of Alex, if we can take it there now. We may be able to make another question, depends how speedy our candidates are.
This is directed at Sarah, and in her manifesto she actually says that she wants better NHS locally and nationally, and I just wanted some expansion on what that actually means.
The NHS is probably our most treasured institution in this country. I think it's no accident that Danny Boyle should choose the moment when the eyes of the world were on London and on Great Britain to celebrate our NHS. But politicians of all stripes face a big challenge, which is the welcome problem that we have an ageing population. And in order to meet that challenge, we need sustainable investment in our NHS. And that is why a Labour government would put in an additional £2.5 billion every year to see 20,000 more nurses, 8,000 more doctors, and 5,000 more care workers, putting this NHS back on its feet, and back on its feet after this government has left it in such a poor state.
Of course we need a better NHS, and UKIP wants a free NHS, and we're planning to put in £3 billion extra into the NHS frontline services, despite all the lies you hear everywhere spread around. But it is the National Health Service. It is not supposed to be the International Health Service. And we believe that people coming to this country from overseas should have medical insurance, like if you go to America you need to get in medical insurance, and other countries too. We don't think that's unfair. We think it just puts the people who've actually paid into the system first, and benefits the people of this country first. Thank you.
The NHS is something that I use and I rely on, but it also has to deal with the ageing population and medical innovation, which costs and puts pressure on the budgets. And that's why the head of the NHS needs £8 billion over the next lifetime, the next Parliament, the next 5 years. And that's why David Cameron has said that in addition to £12 billion that we provided over the last 5 years, we will find the £8 billion it needs over the next 5 years. That's how you have a sustainable NHS.
We're totally against the privatisation of the NHS. We want it brought back into public hands. It's expensive doing it privately. We would repeal the 2012 Health and Social Care Act and introduce an NHS reinstatement bill that would restore the obligation on government to provide a comprehensive health service, abolish competition and market-based To show you how expensive it is, this current government spends £18 million per day from the NHS budget to private health providers. Last year, 6.6 billion went from the NHS budget to pay for private health providers, 50% rise from the government before. So privatisation is expensive, and we would devolve it to local authorities.
The Liberal Democrats identified in the manifesto right at the outset the need to fund the NHS with the additional £8 billion that the NHS's head has identified it needs. We also believe it is essential that there is parity given within NHS to mental health as well as physical health, which in the past has been enormously neglected,
We are in an impossible situation. It is now 5 to 10, which as I said is when we're going to finish. There are other hustings available in this constituency. One of the other wonderful things is in 2010, when Rogerby Parish Church and Ayliffe held a hustings together with other churches together in Finchley, there were only, I think, 2 faith-based hustings in the constituency. In 2015, I think you've all got the opportunity to be kept off the streets and inside synagogues and churches for about 6 or 7 evenings. So there are other opportunities to ask our candidates a question, and I'm very sorry to anybody who didn't get the opportunity for theirs to be asked. But I know all of our candidates aim to make themselves accessible around this area, and all of them have been seen out on the street speaking to people, so please go on with them, copy any of them at any point. What I would like to do as we come towards an end is to say a thank you to a number of people here. Thank you very much indeed to Reverend Rex Morton for keeping fair play. To Sarah Langsford, who made sure that we were all beautifully refreshed. To Adam Martin and Alan Lee, who set us up and made sure that everything worked beautifully. And to Alex Stanley, who did something which is normally unachievable at Ayliffe, which meant we could actually all hear everything. The reason why we do this in our synagogue, in our church, I think is in the book of Jeremiah, where we hear, pray for the peace of the country to which you have been sent, always to be engaged in the community around us. And it's a value that we share between the synagogue and the church. And I know being very engaged, we thought about, should we bring down the screen so that we'd screened off the ark? And we felt, well, no, there is something quite holy in gathering together to think about the community around us. So we didn't screen it off. I hope that was the right decision. We will see when we hear this week's Torah portion, Tazria Torah, it's right in the middle of social issues, so there we are, not so bad. I also would like to say thank you to my colleague, Councillor Cheryl Wunsch, who started us off with a prayer and made sure this was a holy family. And finally, and most importantly, to our candidates who gave an entire evening time to just chat to people earlier, an entire evening when they could have been knocking on doors all around the constituency. We know it's a hugely valuable time to give at this point in the election. To Mike Fear, to Adele Ward, to Jonathan Davis, to Sarah Sackman and to Richard King, thank you so much for all that you do.